What if the person who loves you most in the world is not the person who gave you life? Like, share, and subscribe to hear more stories that will touch your heart. And please, tell us where you are watching from. We absolutely love hearing from you and knowing which part of the world is listening to these incredible journeys. The morning started like any other Tuesday in Hyde Park, Chicago. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky orange and pink, and I was walking to the university where I taught literature to students who were only a few years younger than me. My name is Margaret, and I was 31 years old, living a quiet life above an old bookstore on a tree-lined street. I had my coffee in one hand and a stack of student papers in the other, my mind already jumping ahead to the day's lessons. Then I heard it. A sound so small, so fragile, that at first I thought it was a bird caught in the branches above. But as I got closer to the park entrance, I realized it was crying, a baby's cry, the kind of sound that makes your whole body stop. There, sitting under the old oak tree near the park gates, was a wicker basket. It looked almost peaceful, almost like it belonged there, except for the tiny fists waving in the air and the desperate cries coming from inside. My heart started beating so fast I thought it might break through my chest. I looked around. The park was almost empty at this hour. No one was running back. No one was calling out. With trembling hands, I moved the blanket aside and saw him. A newborn, probably only a few days old, wrapped in a blue hospital blanket. Next to him was a note written in shaky handwriting. It read simply, "Please take care of him. I cannot. His name is Elijah. He deserves better than I can give him. Please love him like I cannot." That was the moment my entire life changed. I didn't call the police. I didn't take him to a hospital. Instead, I held that tiny, crying baby against my chest and felt something crack open inside me, something I didn't know was closed. It was like my heart had been waiting for him without my even knowing it. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, just holding him and whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. I've got you. I've got you." That day, I became a mother. The first weeks were the hardest. I had no experience with babies, no family to help me, and very little money. I called the university and told them I needed a leave of absence. I couldn't explain why, not really. How do you explain that you found a baby in a park and now you're responsible for an entire human life? But they let me go, and somehow I made it work. My apartment above the bookstore became our whole world. It was tiny, just one bedroom, a small kitchen, and a living room that barely fit a second-hand couch I bought from a thrift store. The landlord, Mr. Chin, who owned the bookstore downstairs, was kinder than I deserved. When he found out about Elijah, he didn't ask questions. He simply helped me move a donated crib into the corner of my bedroom and brought up milk and diapers whenever I ran short on money. Those first months, I would rock Elijah through the nights, singing songs my own mother had sung to me, wondering who his biological mother was and whether she ever regretted leaving him. I tried not to be angry with her, because I could see in that note that it came from a place of desperation, not cruelty. She wanted better for him. She wanted him to have a chance. And I promised him, every single night as he slept in my arms, that I would give him that chance, no matter what it cost me. Money was tight. I sold my grandmother's jewelry. I sold books I had collected over my lifetime. I took on freelance work editing papers for students at night after Elijah was asleep. I worked as a substitute teacher at the local high school. Some days I was so tired that I would fall asleep standing up while holding him. But I never let him know. I smiled through every moment because he deserved a mother who wasn't afraid. As Elijah grew from a baby into a toddler, he became my greatest joy and my greatest motivation. His first smile made me cry. His first word, which was "Mama," made me feel like I had accomplished something greater than any degree or career ever could. When he took his first steps across our tiny living room, stumbling and falling into my arms, I felt like I was watching a miracle unfold. I created a little sanctuary for him in the corner of our apartment. I put up colorful pictures on the walls and hung a mobile made from strings and buttons above his small bed. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and it was filled with love. When money was especially tight and the apartment felt too cold in winter, I would burn candles and pretend we had a real fireplace, telling him stories about magical places while he sat on my lap, his small fingers wrapped around my hair. By the time Elijah was 5 years old, I had started teaching again, working part-time at the university and part-time at the high school. He started kindergarten at the public school near our home, and I watched him walk through those doors with such pride it felt like my chest might burst. He was a quiet boy, thoughtful and artistic, always drawing pictures of dragons and castles and far-off places. At night, I would ask him to tell me stories about the pictures he had drawn, and he would sit beside me and spin tales of adventures and magic. "Mama," he would say, looking up at me with eyes full of wonder, "when will we go to those places? When will we see the castles and the dragons?" "Someday, baby," I would whisper, running my fingers through his hair. "Someday we will go everywhere. I promise you, we will see the whole world together." I didn't know when that someday would come, but I meant it with every fiber of my being. For 17 years, my entire world revolved around keeping that promise, even if it was only in the form of dreams and bedtime stories. He was my purpose. He was my reason. He was my Elijah, and he was mine. But I didn't know that his past was about to come looking for him. 17 years passed like pages turning in a book. Elijah grew from a quiet toddler into a quiet teenager, and somewhere along the way, our small apartment above the bookstore became a home filled with his artwork. The walls were covered with his paintings and drawings, portraits of people he saw on the street, landscapes of places he dreamed about, and increasingly, images that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him, from feelings he couldn't quite put into words. At 16, Elijah was tall and thoughtful, with gentle eyes that seemed to see things other people missed. He had won an art competition at his high school, and the prize was a scholarship offered to a prestigious summer program. I was so proud I could barely breathe when I read the letter. This was it. This was the beginning of him getting out, of him seeing those castles and those far-off places we had talked about during all those bedtime stories. But something had shifted in him. I could feel it, the way you can feel a storm coming even before the clouds appear in the sky. It started with small questions. "Mom, do you think my real mom ever thinks about me?" he asked one evening while we were making dinner together. My hands froze on the cutting board. We had always been honest with Elijah about how I found him. I had never hidden the truth from him because I believed he deserved to know his own story. But hearing him call someone else's real mom felt like a knife sliding between my ribs. "I'm sure she does," I said carefully, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was breaking. "I think she thinks about you every single day." "Do you know who she is?" he asked, and I could hear the longing in his voice, the questions that had been building up inside him like pressure behind a dam.
"No, sweetheart."
"I don't. But if you ever want to find her, I would help you. I promise you that." He was quiet for a long moment, and then he hugged me from behind, wrapping his arms around me while I stood at the stove. "I love you, Mom," he said. "I just want to know where I come from. I need to understand that part of myself." I understood. I did. But understanding doesn't make it hurt any less. Over the next few months, Elijah became quieter. He spent more time alone in the attic room we had converted into his art studio when he was 12. That attic had always been a sanctuary, a place where he could paint without interruption, where the slanted walls and small round window made him feel like he was in his own private world. Now he went up there after school and didn't come down until dinner. His artwork became darker, more introspective. The dragons and castles were replaced with faces, searching faces, confused faces, faces that looked like they were looking for something they had lost. One evening in March, I found a note on my pillow. It was in Elijah's handwriting, careful and deliberate. "Dear Mom, I love you more than anything in this world. Please don't hate me for wanting to know where I come from. I need to find my birth mother. I need to understand my own story. I've been researching online and I found a way to do a DNA test. I'm going to send it in. Whatever happens, know that you will always be my real mother. You're the one who stayed. You're the one who loved me when no one else did. But I need to do this. I hope you understand. Love, Elijah." I sat on my bed and cried. I cried because I understood. I cried because I was terrified. I cried because I knew that the world outside our little apartment was about to come crashing in, and I didn't know if I was strong enough to survive it. The DNA results came back 3 weeks later. There was a match. A woman named Vanessa Sterling had submitted her DNA to the same database, and the results showed that she was Elijah's biological mother. The website connected them, and within hours, Elijah had her contact information. Vanessa Sterling was nothing like I had imagined. When she came to our apartment, because of course she came to our apartment, uninvited but unavoidable, I saw a tall, elegant woman in her late 40s, dressed in expensive clothes, with perfectly styled hair and the kind of confidence that comes from money and privilege. She looked nothing like Elijah, but there was something in the way she moved, something deliberate and controlled, that made me understand how two people could be connected by blood even if they looked like strangers. "Mrs. Chun," she said, extending her hand to me. I noticed she didn't call me Margaret or Mother. She kept me at a distance with a title that was both respectful and dismissive. "I want to thank you for taking care of my son. You did a good job. He's clearly intelligent and talented." The words were polite, but there was an edge underneath them. It was like she was evaluating a purchase she had made years ago and was now coming to collect. My hands were shaking as I shook hers. Elijah looked torn between two worlds. He hugged Vanessa carefully, like he was afraid she might break or disappear if he held on too tight. She held him stiffly at first, then seemed to relax, and I watched as she studied his face like she was trying to memorize every detail. Over the next few weeks, Vanessa became a regular presence in our lives. She took Elijah to expensive restaurants. She bought him new clothes and art supplies worth more money than I made in a month. She told him about his biological father, a man named James Sterling who had died when Elijah was a baby. She told him about the Sterling family legacy, about money and connections and opportunities that I could never provide. And then, one morning, a letter arrived. It was from a lawyer. Vanessa Sterling was petitioning the court for primary guardianship of Elijah. She was claiming that I had no legal right to him, that I had essentially kidnapped a child and raised him without proper authorization. She had money for lawyers. She had a stable home and a family name. She had something I didn't have, a biological claim. The courtroom was cold and intimidating. The judge sat high above us, and lawyers in dark suits asked me questions designed to make me look like an unfit mother. They questioned how I could afford to raise a child on a teacher's salary. They suggested that I had stolen him from his rightful family. They painted a picture of me as a desperate woman who had taken advantage of a baby that didn't belong to me.
But then it was my turn to speak.
I stood up, and my legs felt like water, but I opened my mouth and the words came out. I talked about finding Elijah in that basket under the oak tree. I talked about the note his mother left, the note that said he deserved better. I talked about every sacrifice, every late night, every time I went without so that he could have what he needed. I talked about teaching him to read and to dream and to see beauty in the world. I talked about being there when he was sick with measles at 3 years old, sitting up with him through the fever and the fear. I talked about going to every school event, every art show, every moment of his life. Motherhood, I said, my voice shaking but steady, is not about the blood in your veins. It's about the choices you make every single day. It's about staying when it's hard. It's about loving someone even when the world tells you that you don't have the right. I chose Elijah the moment I saw him in that basket. And every single day after that, I chose him again. The courtroom was silent. Even the lawyers looked down at their papers. The judge ruled in my favor. Elijah remained in my custody. But as I looked at my son sitting in that courtroom, I realized that a legal victory meant nothing if he didn't choose me in his heart. I had won the battle, but I was terrified I was losing the war. That night, Elijah was quieter than I had ever heard him. We sat together in the living room, not speaking, just existing in the space between us. Finally, he looked at me with tears streaming down his face and said something I will never forget. "Mom, I don't want to choose between you and her. I don't want to have to pick one person to love and one person to lose. Can't they both be my family?" And in that moment, I understood that the real test wasn't the courtroom. The real test was whether I could be strong enough to let him love her too, even though it scared me more than anything I had ever faced in my life. What happens when a mother realizes that holding on too tight is the fastest way to lose everything? Like, share, and subscribe because this final part of Elijah's story will change how you think about family forever. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from right now. We genuinely love hearing from you and knowing that people from all around the world are connecting with these stories about love, sacrifice, and the true meaning of belonging. After the courtroom battle, everything shifted. I was terrified that I had won the case but lost my son. Vanessa began visiting more frequently, and Elijah would go with her to her beautiful home across town, a place so different from our little apartment above the bookstore that it might as well have been another universe. He would come back with new experiences and stories, and I could see the conflict written all over his face. He loved me, but he was also discovering a part of himself that had been missing his whole life. One afternoon, I made a decision that scared me more than anything I had ever done. I sat Elijah down, and I told him the truth. Elijah, I need you to know something. I love you more than my own life. But I also love you enough to let you go if that's what you need to do. If you want to live with Vanessa, if you want to get to know her and your family, I won't stop you. I won't make you feel guilty. I want you to be happy, and I want you to find out who you are, even if that means losing you. He stared at me like I had just spoken in a language he didn't understand. You're saying you want me to leave? He asked, his voice small and broken. No, I said, reaching for his hand. I'm saying I want you to choose. And whatever you choose, I will support you. Because real love isn't about holding on so tight that someone can't breathe. Real love is about letting go. Elijah didn't leave. But something changed after that conversation. The tension between us eased, like a rope that had been pulled tight suddenly going slack. He started spending time with Vanessa without the guilt, without the fear that he was betraying me. And I started to understand something profound. You don't lose people by letting them go. You only lose them by trying to keep them trapped. As the months passed, Elijah threw himself into his art with renewed energy. The attic studio became his refuge again, but this time he wasn't hiding. He was creating. His paintings began to tell a story of two women, one who found him and one who gave birth to him. Two stories that were separate but somehow woven together into the fabric of who he was. He painted portraits of me, sitting at the kitchen table with my stack of student papers, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. He painted me singing to him when he was small, my mouth open in song, my eyes closed. He painted memories we had shared. The day we went to the zoo and he saw a real dragon-colored lizard that he had drawn 1,000 times in his imagination. The day we danced in the rain because we couldn't afford to do anything else and the rain was free. But he also started painting Vanessa. He painted her sitting at a piano, her hands poised above the keys. He painted her in a garden, surrounded by flowers. He painted her the way you paint someone you are trying to understand, someone whose story is still being written. One evening, about a year after the court case, Vanessa came to our apartment for dinner. This was significant because she rarely came to our home. She always preferred to have Elijah visit her. But that night, she sat at our small kitchen table, eating the pasta I had made, and she said something that surprised me. Margaret, I owe you an apology. When I first came back into Elijah's life, I thought I could reclaim him. I thought that blood and biology and money could make up for 17 years of absence. But watching how he creates art from his memories with you, I've realized something. You gave him what I never could have. You gave him a childhood filled with love and constancy. You didn't have money or a fancy home, but you had something infinitely more valuable. You had presence. You were there.
I didn't know what to say.
Tears started rolling down my face, and I wasn't sure if they were tears of relief or sadness or something in between. I don't want to replace you, Vanessa continued. I want to be part of his life, but not at the expense of yours. He needs both of us. And I think I need both of you too. Elijah was accepted to Portland Art School on a full scholarship. It was the kind of opportunity that comes once in a lifetime, the kind of moment we had dreamed about during all those bedtime stories in our tiny apartment. But before he left for college, before he stepped into his own future, something happened that none of us expected. Vanessa got sick. It started as a cough that wouldn't go away, and within weeks, the doctors discovered cancer. Suddenly, the woman who had seemed so invincible, so powerful, so certain of her place in the world, became fragile. And Elijah, in his gentle, artistic way, became the bridge between his two mothers. He would paint while she sat with him. She would watch his hands move across the canvas, and she would tell him stories about his father, about the family he came from, about the parts of himself that lived in her DNA. And then he would come home to me, and I would hold him while he cried, and I would tell him that it was okay to love her, that loving her didn't mean loving me any less. The night before Elijah left for Portland, the three of us sat together in Vanessa's living room. She was tired, but her eyes were clear. Elijah had brought a series of paintings, portraits of both of us, side by side. In one, I was holding him as a baby. In another, Vanessa was embracing him as a young man. In a third, we were both there, and Elijah was standing between us, looking forward into a future we couldn't see. "You know what I've realized?" Vanessa said, looking at the paintings. "Family isn't about who gave birth to you, or who raised you. It's about who shows up. It's about who stays." Margaret stayed. And now I'm here, and I'm grateful for every moment I get. Elijah looked at me, and I nodded. He stood up and hugged his biological mother, and then he came and held me, and for the first time since he had started searching for answers, I felt like we were all exactly where we were supposed to be. Years later, Elijah became a professional illustrator. He created beautiful books for children, stories about found families and unexpected connections, and the many different ways that love can look. But more importantly, he started a mentoring program for children in foster care, children who didn't have homes, children who were searching for where they belonged. He would teach them to paint, and while they painted, he would tell them his story. "I was abandoned," he would tell them, "but I was found. And the person who found me loved me so much that she was willing to let me go to find out who I really was." That's what real love looks like. It doesn't hold on so tight that it suffocates. It holds on gently, and it lets go when it needs to. Vanessa lived to see Elijah graduate from art school. She came to his graduation, weak but smiling, and she gave him a journal filled with letters she had written him over the years. In the front, she had written, "To my son, who taught me that family is a choice we make every single day." I gave him something too, the original note that his birth mother had left in the basket 17 years ago. I had kept it safe all those years, and now I gave it to him so he would always know that he was wanted, that he was loved, even before he was born. Elijah became someone who understood that belonging isn't determined by biology or blood or the color of your skin or the family name you carry. Belonging is created through presence, through choice, through the daily decision to show up and love someone even when it's hard. The city became his canvas. The studio became his sanctuary. And the kitchen where his mother had made pasta on a teacher's salary became the most sacred place in his memory, not because of what was there, but because of who was there. The story closes not with an ending, but with a question that lives in the heart of anyone who has ever wondered where they truly belong. Where do you belong? Which city are you listening from right now? What is your definition of home? Is it a place? Is it a person? Is it a choice? If this story moved you, if it made you think about the people in your life who have stayed, who have loved you through the hard times, please comment below and tell us your own story of belonging. Like and share this with someone who needs to know that family is built on constancy, not just on blood. Subscribe so you never miss another story that reminds us what it means to be human. And most of all, tell us where you're watching from, because we genuinely love knowing that people all around this beautiful world are connecting with these stories about love, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds that tie us together. Thank you for listening to Elijah's story. Thank you for believing in the power of love.